Hey Rob.
Huh. Hi, Frode.
Hey, how are you?
I'm okay. Looks like you're outside.
I am. It's really, really hot here today. Really hot.
Um,
Probably not as hot as in India, but yeah, still, it's hang on, 28 degrees. So it's okay warm, right?
I've started doing something for you.
Oh, tell me more.
A little piece on public and private text.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Mhm.
For today's topic, I will be using the word volume.
Good.
I'm having a bit of a problem interchangeably talking about volume and cube. So we'll see what comes out of it today. I've kind of invited you all today under semi-false pretenses, as I'll say to the rest when they come. So I'll go through some of the things we found. And if anyone has something to chime in, please do, because obviously it'll be on the record. But also we can go through some volume/cube interactions, which would be really good to have feedback on. Hello, Peter. How are you?
Hey, surviving here in North Carolina.
What did you
Hot.
say? What did you say?
Surviving here in North Carolina. Just it's hot and humid.
Yes, I just had one of my son's good school friends that he's known for years just moved to North Carolina from London.
Oh, that's a big difference in weather.
But yeah, that's true. But right now it's kind of hot here too. We have 28 degrees Celsius, which is
Yeah,
82.4 Fahrenheit.
yeah. You guys are running pretty hot too. You're about the same as here, actually.
Okay, yeah, no, that's cool. I've been to Charlotte once in the late 80s.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I went
It's
to see
nice.
a Hornets game.
Oh, really? Oh, sports is big down here.
Yeah, no, it was a very cultured experience. Very glad to have experienced it. Very
A
glad.
different culture experience. Yeah.
Yes, that's very true. So let's see. There's a lot of holidaying going on, so we'll see who joins us. We'll give people a few more minutes. I have written something up in Author, so there may be a lot of text on the screens. You're not expected to read any of it. Then I have a few slides, but Fabian, you can hear, right? You are correctly in place. Fabian, can you give a thumbs up or a voice or a... You're in mainland Europe. No, you're not. You're in Greece. You may not have good connection. Okay, fair enough. Or maybe he's getting ready. And Mark is logging in. Let me just text to Fabian. They've changed the interface here in Zoom. It's a little bit annoying to text to individuals. So participants. Fabian, there we go. Double click. Boom. Main chat. Oh, okay. I got a message. We can all see it from Fabian. Cool. Yeah, so last Wednesday, Dini, who was on holiday for a bit, a very, very rare event for her, and Fabian and I, we had a chat of, okay, we've got done what we need for Sloan as a minimum, now we can have fun. And that resulted in going back to what we've gone through many times, which is kind of a cube or a volume interaction. So today I'll do a little bit of an intro thing, a little bit of an overview of what we have learned together. If you disagree or if you have something to add, even if it's quite a long-winded thing, please do, because today is a themed discussion. It's not a presentation. So it's just to spark some thoughts. And then once we've done that, it would be really fun if, well, at least I think it would be, if we could go through and you pour in your ideas for how to interact with the knowledge cube, assuming all kinds of things. Okay, so Mark is dealing with camera. That's fine. Peter, how hot is it in the big city?
It's getting up there. Should be able to get a couple hours in the garden before it's unbearable.
Yeah, exactly. I was not going to be outside, but I found a shaded spot hot here too. Right, okay, well, I'm going to actually start. And let me just do it the right way. Yeah, anybody have anything before we start? I'm making you guys small now, putting you on the side. Okay, so the way that I have set up Zoom means that I probably cannot see it if you have a hand up, so please just interrupt at any time, right? So the reason I'm doing this mostly in author is because that's what I'm used to, and I'm trying to find a way to make it more of a presentation thing. At the heart of all this, I'm a tool maker more than anything else, so I try to make it fit. So the point of this theme discussion today is partly Fabian went through a short while ago our 6-month kind of review of code. So this is a little bit of a review of a little bit of what we have learned, why we're doing it, and then we'll skip into talking about the cube. So a total skip ahead. I really want you to keep in mind this volume of information. That's the key thing we'll be talking about today. Because it seemed when Dini and Fabian and I had a discussion last week to try to figure out what to do for the end of the year, the most spatial thing is probably a space. I know it sounds like a joke, but instead of dealing with different layers of flat documents, a cube or a volume, I still haven't figured out what name to use, so if you have options, please don't keep it a secret. Whether it's a cube that's tiny or room size, in a sense, is irrelevant, but that's what we're talking about. So the why now is really kind of important. We know from history that human evolution got spurred on every time there was a major change in the environment. And it comes down to this: any substantial change to an organism's environment presents a significant challenge for the organism's fitness. You gotta fit the new environment, right? And now that we are quite literally diving into these displays that we and other people look at all day, that's going to be a very different environment. So how we get a handle on it as a species is not a tiny thing, both how we deal with the AI interactions and how we can flourish in XR. We really cannot afford to make it just a corporate fun thing. I know we said it before, but I think it's important enough to bear repeating. And then it's the thing that is very, very important for our community, that is what to augment. To me, it's very personal. We must, as a species, augment what connects us. We must augment our communication and how we engage positively. We cannot afford all the nonsense that's happening on so many different levels without needing to go into it. And there was that wonderful Nature editorial with the heading, "Writing is Thinking." I really think so, and I think you all agree, which is why you're here. So if we can help the reading and writing bit, we can help people think without dictating how they should think. So then I will show you some early interfaces, 2D interfaces. You've probably all seen these, but the reason I'm showing you them is to remind us for the conversation that what we have today was by no means preordained. Right, so this is Augment NLS. There's no visible interface elements on that screen at all. And then we go to the Alto Executive of the park environment. It's beginning to get some stuff like little bits of titles and stuff. And then of course we have the Mac. In this screenshot here, that is the size pixel by pixel of the 9-inch. So when I blow it up a little bigger, it gets very blurry. But here, already, it's pretty much frozen. This is what we have now. Of course, if I take a screenshot of my computer now, it's the same. It just happens to be a little higher graphic thing, right? So I think that's really worth keeping in mind. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but this is just to put our brains in the right place. Look at Ted Nelson's work. It was very, very different. This is Perspec with lines, and then he made it more complicated. Then he coded it even more complicated, and then he made it super complicated because for TED, visualized connections is really, really important. I invited him here today, but he couldn't make it, unfortunately. And it's funny with Ted because he says he's not interested in VR. And with all due loving respect, which is huge, that's absolute rubbish, Ted, if you watch this. Because Ted's work is three-dimensional already. Whether you put a headset or not is really secondary. So look at this. And look at this. And look at this. Right? It is 3D on a screen, pointing to another way of interacting with knowledge. Now, as we have experienced, and this is maybe the first issue we found, is that when you have these lines in space, it can get really, really annoying when you're on a headset. But this is at least an alternative way forward. So then we have the uniqueness of XR. I think this is really important, and if you disagree with me, I would absolutely love to have it here. So for the uniqueness of XR, what does not change in XR, neither our sharp foveal vision nor our field of view increases. It stays the same. It is probably obvious, but I think it's something that I have to repeat for myself every once in a while, because it's easy to think of when you're in a XR space that you're almost disembodied, but you are not. You still have your built-in two little round bits to focus. That's what we're building for, right? So what VR XR adds is our ability to perceive depth based on head movement, to move around something and to move objects. It's really the dimensionality that is included, whether you have stereoscopic vision for it, or whether you move your head, or you move your body, or you move the object. And of course, as we talked about many times, we can go as Euclidean or non-Euclidean as we want to. It's also something we found, and again, if you disagree, please do tell me. XR takes away the tactile because virtual objects generally do not have embodiment. They're not physical. So if you write with a pen, you have a pen to hold. We don't have that anymore with this virtual stuff. Even the controllers have been given up on. Of course, things are being developed, like Logitech has this new pencil that's coming out at some point, and things are happening. But generally, if you grab a piece of knowledge, the only thing you'll be touching if you pinch are your fingers, which is why it is important to use fingers. Because if you have a self-touch, maybe we can call it that. On the radio, Mark, you may have heard it, there's a show here called Unspeakable, brilliant comedy show about language, if you guys want to, it's on BBC Sounds. And somebody was complaining about iPads and phones having no buttons anymore. So they want touchy, really interfaces, not touchy-feely. There is something to be said about that. And then finally on this issue is the notion that every window has a bounding frame. This is from the brilliant book, The Case Against Reality, that Fabienne has suggested many times and I randomly started reading. So our eyes can see, but only what it is tuned to see. When we get into XR, what will it let us see and what will remain outside the frame? These are questions we need to consider. Spatialized knowledge sharing, that's really obvious. We talked about it many times. The thing is that we need to start with the world as it is. And we need to take in flat old documents. We need to do what we can with metadata to make them spatial. And then, of course, documents that are created in XR we can take further. And then we can use things like save JSON or visual meta, whatever we call it, to remain. So that's still an issue. Now, gestures is obviously a huge topic, but just a few things here. And that is because gestures are so amazing now in all the main systems, controllers have lost prominence. And there will be gesture clash between system gestures and so on. Also gesture clash with people, just like I'm doing now, just talking. It's something that's come up a lot. Suddenly, this happened to be something stored. These are real constraints we have to look at. The finger touching itself is good for pinching, but also the secondary hand, something that Adam talked about quite a long time ago. There are other ways to make it less likely. You know, if you do this, it's very unlikely doing this randomly. I think that's been one of our key findings. And then when it comes to the hand menu, the manual menu, which we started on last year, there are many ways to do that, but will it keep being touching fingers, or will there be sub-menus in the air? These are things we should probably look at, as well as sign language. If any of you have access to people who are experts in sign language, we may learn some reasoning or logic behind it, why certain things are easy to do. You know, when you use a finger for a mouse, moving in this direction rather than sideways is easier. There may be similar things with signs, so we need to do research, because we are quite literally pointing to a new feature here, a future. And then briefly, and this is also going quite far back, and that is if you get nauseous in VR, the way Brandl handled it by you don't move yourself, you move the item, to me completely changed it anyway. I didn't get sick, even though it's the same visual, but you feel your hand is moving the space, not you in space. Something we can keep thinking about. Soft Space has a great system whereby if you make a fist and then you pinch, that means you're moving the whole space. So I really want us to look at two-handed interactions. Of course, it should be possible for accessibility to do most of them with one hand, but there is something special about grabbing the future with both hands. Also, when you play a computer game, even with a big screen, you don't get the same nauseousness because your peripheral vision, which is movement sensitive, doesn't move. So maybe we can also do that, where if you are moving in a virtual environment, it presents something static in the frames. You only move in a rectangle. And when you have reached your target, that goes away, that fake side. This is, again, trying to work with our actual optical and brain visual system to get past these things. I'm just having a quick look at this, make sure I didn't miss anything. But yeah, what we need to now develop together is some kind of an interaction language. And that goes down to the next one, which is, placing interactions. So on a traditional computer, we have the rectangle. On a Mac, of course, we have options on the top, and that's Fitt's law. If you bump up against something, it stops you, so you get a good target. In XR, we have no such thing. It is really, really difficult to invent something when you have no frames. We talk about it being difficult to start with a new blank piece of paper. Here, we don't even have a paper. So we need to think of the language of where we're going to place the interactions, because some interactions maybe should be in your hands, in your body. Some may be information interactions as a HUD that stays with you. But also some of them should maybe be in objects. And instead of just having the equivalent of a control click menu for a linear system, where do we place these interactions is becoming important. And then we get down to the notion of a home space. Currently, the desktop is owned by the operating system for traditional machines. I think that is a bad idea, right? Where you go into first, you should have real control over. I'm hoping that where we are with WebXR and the web in the future, it should be open enough that anybody can design their home place. I've been experimenting a lot with the map in Author, as I think you've all seen many, many times. It's easy to design, easy to add things, but it's not so easy to make it my home space for information. I think that's something we can really think about in terms of spatial management. You guys are so quiet today. I hope you're all still here. I can only see Peter, but Peter's paying attention, so that's fine. That's enough.
No, Peter's actually a wax figure.
It's a very realistic wax figure, Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
And you have turned into a typeface. That's quite impressive too.
Yes, it's a giant smiley, but I can't quite get the characters. I'm not sure. I'm in my vacation office. I'm not sure that it's a good idea to not have a landmarks if people go back to. Um,
Oh, Jamie, is it just
I'm
me
not.
missing? I'm having
You
problems
can
hearing
hear
you.
me? Okay.
Could everyone else hear Jamie? Is it just me?
I hear him.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
I can
you're
hear you
okay
now.
here.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh,
I,
yeah.
I, I'm not sure. I used to read more about navigation, and then there was some controversy about some of the ideas, and I sort of lost track of what people think now. But landmark was one of the things that it was believed to be was very important for navigation, that people always had something they could reorient by or go back to start again. And I think like when I do stuff on my Mac, I go to my home directory and I navigate from there.
Hmm.
Now, obviously, I use a Mac like I bought a Mac because it was Unix based, and I'm much happier in the terminal than I am in the GUI, the graphical user interface. But when I do something I know, and I'm and always, even if I open my, I don't know, the home page, my website in a web browser, I can always go back to one place that I know is always there, the top of the directory tree or my home directory, and work my way. And I, I think it would be good for people to be able to say, in one step, I can get to where I want to start, but I can always go back to one static place, or maybe not static, but one place that I know where it is. And now that I'm hearing myself talk, I'm remembering that web browsers generally let you choose your own start page. So for some people, it's a portal like Yahoo or Facebook or whatever. For other people, it's their own homepage. But there's also maybe there's always some fixed point that they choose. Like, I don't know, maybe they start with Google or whatever.
Having something to hold on to navigate is absolutely important. And
Hmm.
to address that, well, I see Brandl is here now, which is great because I just referred to you, Brandl, on the what you've done with moving the mural. That's where I think that's partly where Jamie got into this point. Because then we went down to having a home place, yeah, a home space in XR. And Jamie, I agree. It's important to have a specific home. However, I hope it won't necessarily be Apple or Microsoft or whoever that owns that you can own that yourself.
Yep.
That we no longer need a finder, right? So that was really that.
When I have to call tech support, they always tell me go to the Apple menu at the top because that stuff never changes. And then everything can always be worked out. It reminds me of the fourth programming language where you could redefine everything. And sometimes people would get into such a mess because it would have changed so much that nobody else could debug anything
Yeah.
because they overconfigured.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that leads into this next point, and there's only a few points left, and that is open and shut. How should we open something? This is really, really important. I think it's exactly what you're talking about, Jamie. Where do we go to find our stuff in XR? And it relates to once you've shut something, how do you find it again, right? When you start having something on your work area, on a traditional computer, you have Windows. In this area, my friend Keith, I'm not sure if he's here, I don't think so. He suggested that when you open something, you kind of drop it in a space. So you kind of do a clicky, whatever, and then you say it's over there. Now you have a new work area over there, which may be good for some people who want to work 360. Or maybe the alternative, you'd get ready and then you use your secondary hand to move everything else around you. But these are notions that we need to really look at because otherwise the environment will get very, very messy very, very quickly. You need to know where to go to get your basic stuff. You need to have control. And flexibility introduces complexity. And I think that's our main challenge, how to, excuse me, bugs, since I'm outside, to deal with that. And then we go to connecting knowledge. which is when to replace spaces when we open something, when to open a new space. I mean, on a web browser, you can command click and open a new tab and so on. But when you're talking about opening something that could be potentially an entire environment, it goes to the last thing we talked about. Where should we do that? And then kind of skimming through, I think this is very obvious for you guys. Different ways of dealing with screens. We have, when you're reading a significant volume of text, you probably need something roughly like a 14-inch display or a notebook or something to read it with a bit of a substrate. If you have smaller text, it can be floating around in space. But of course, we're also looking very much as icons and how we can use something along the lines of semantic zooming to go into information and seeing it fall back into icons. Some weird animal. Right. Now we're getting to kind of the meat of today, and this is where I kind of tricked you guys to talk about the volume. And gonna go here. So first, hang on, your chat is in the way. You can still see, right?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, so just a few very brief slides on geographic maps. When we have talked and thought about a lot of having different layers in a 2D document, something that we may want to bring back. Even in maps, to be able to, on Apple Maps or Google Maps or any other main maps, to choose what layers to see is kind of tricky. I think it's a piece of magic that we've lost, but it's a piece of magic we can probably bring back in XR. I mean, here is what I, as a normal user, could finally figure out to get layered. I don't find it to be very impressive. We're looking at an area of the world with a huge amount of history. In fact, we were in Dunkirk on holiday last week, and Emily keeps sending me messages, my wife, every once in a while, about these amazing things she's found out. They're not embedded in any map views. This is a product I have a long time ago, and I'm going to redo it now because it really annoys me. Being a European, growing up in Norway and Britain, I have a problem with the geography of Europe. Traveling helps, but the problem is if you look at a map like this, it doesn't allow you to see outlines of countries only. You can't easily say that, so it's really, really messy. So this product called InterAtlas, you tap anywhere in the world and it'll do an outline of the country. You tap again and it goes away. That's it. So by default, there's nothing. I think that is also something we should think about when it comes to our knowledge. You get the basics, you do an interaction, and then you see additional complexity. This is a slide Vint Cerf had in a presentation about 2 years ago, I think. And it's just a fun way of showing spatial data. It's for a very specific Shakespeare thing. And then we go to the end of this stuff. So actually, no, I'm going to show you the last slide first. So this is the super simple thing. And Fabian, please interject if I remember anything wrong. So think of a cube. It can be tiny, it can be massive, it can be, room size, or it can be a sculpture in front of you. And the reason one of the sides here is more colorful, like for instance the floor or the wall behind, is because it can have information on it. So in this example, the user has added concepts or whatever the heck they want outside of XR. And they have then imported a proceedings. The proceedings then gravitate towards what is on this wall. So it's just a simple, basically 2.5D layout, right? Point is that each of these walls, the user should be able to control what they represent. It could be like this, that they are concepts. It could also be logic. For instance, any references of anything in this space should appear here. It could be people, it could be all kinds of things. So our job then is to try to figure out the interactions for that, which is what we're talking about here. So the 3D layout, the user should be able to walk around this volume. scale the volume, move things inside. If you move things that have been computationally put, you should be able to snap them. But if you do, they can snap back. Change the visualization. And it's really important, the notion that's come out of these discussions of you specify what the walls are, right? So we can have multidimensional knowledge mapping. I'll stop sharing because this text isn't useful. But just to finish, imagine a cube being a view spec. But each side, let's call them smart walls because it sounds stupid, right? Each wall can be defined. It can be an XY axis. It can be a topic map that you have, or knowledge map you put things on. It can be computational, like I said, all the references or any people, show them here. It can also be an LLM if you want. So you have all these sides, and you can choose. And how we do the interactions is really what I'd like to talk to you guys about. You should be able to move them about, change them, and also these cubes should be allowed to be empty. So that, let's say Brandl has developed a really, really good view of a certain type of documentation. Let's say Apple technical documentation with it, Maybe he's not even allowed to share it with us. Fine. Mark Anderson has decided to analyze certain years of hypertext conference, and he has to explain it to us because he used all the sides, and it's super complicated. And if we look at it this side, it's just a mess. But we make it room size, and we're standing in it. And then, we have Mark talking over he says, no, this represents that represents this. This is the future I think we can go. So thank you for your patience. So I hope now, and I would really like to hear perspectives, even if they're just dreamy, of having a completely manipulable knowledge base where you can put anything, be it academic papers or even news articles. And over to you.
I'm really excited by the ideas of being able to construct entire spaces. My mind leaps obviously to the web because that's where I live. One of the challenges, and there are some really harrowing videos out there about privacy and safety that I've watched recently that have only sort of crystallized my view on this, is that the demarcation of who gets what kind of data about a user and their action in a space is it's acceptable to just one person who's present. There's some real challenges with that. So I'm personally a little bit dumped is not the right word, but it's something that's having to give me pause about the sort of the fluidity of an environment that has a real kind of multi ownership kind of characteristics. It's not a reason why we can't do it, but it does mean that we need to be conscious of what kind of qualifications we have the ability to put over interactions in order to clear a safe space for them. And I think there's going to be something there, something constructive, but I don't. But it's important enough that it sort of needs to be a test, a litmus test early on in a concept, in order to make sure that it has some response to it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Peter.
Well, one thing I think we should consider is that not everyone should necessarily see the same representation of other people within the shared space. For instance, I might want to authorize you and Mark Anderson to see what I have on my data wall to my left, but someone who is a first-time visitor to the group, I might want them to only see a blank wall there. So we should have some sort of a language to describe what conditions would attach to the visibility of elements in the space, and then rely on the cyber deck or whatever we want to call it on the viewer's end to only present the filtered version of the data stream. We wouldn't want the data to make it into their headset if they're not authorized to see it. So something at the server level would have to be sending a different stream of data to different participants' headsets in order to handle the security issue?
Yes, that is important. I think, however, that is for the future, at least conceptually. I think these are private, at least to begin with. So you have your own playroom, because the one thing I don't think we all understand, that includes me, so I don't think we understand the complexity of designing the interactions for this. Just the actual way of how do you turn the big space? How do you move one item inside it? How do you move it back? How do you copy it? All of these things are myriad. And if we manage to make that private and really, really compelling, because right now, I don't know if you've had the same experience, but whenever I put a friend in the headset and they can do something with the map, even if it's just this, they just light up. It's just being able to move A to B, absolutely amazing. So with this, we're going to give them the ability to, let's say you hold your hand and you pull something out, that means it's from this side. They're going to go mad. But it's going to be hugely complex. So our job is to work through making it usable. Ashkant, thank you for your patience.
No, thank you for all the points brought up. Maybe one thing relevant that caught my attention now was about the differences inside VR or XR in general with our physical abilities as well. So when we say view of FOV or all of that is kind of similar, like that's our physical, let's say, capabilities, right? So they remain the same, but one of the issues is currently a lot of the headsets, or most of the headsets have like fixed focus, right? So everything is at infinity, so everything remains in focus all the time. I think there are very focal displays coming out in research prototypes, but not as much in commercial headsets currently. But that is also kind of a major point, I feel, whenever we are dealing with lots of information in 3D. So you cannot easily, let's say, if you have lots of different documents in front of you, maybe you are focusing on one while everything else kind of gets blurred in real space. But then in VR or in the current generation of headsets, at least, all of it remains in focus, which makes it harder to have like lots of information in front of you at the same time. So maybe in terms of physical constraints being different from like space inside the headset, maybe that's one thing that is worth keeping in mind. And sorry, and just one more thing to add is about this concept of hot corners or snapping windows, right? How we have in Windows, or even I think Apple probably, like most operating systems have a way to snap things like Windows apps, whatever. So maybe what would be something that would, since we're talking about the volume, what would be kind of a gesture or a method to, or interaction to snap different things to different places and like switch between different views. That could be an interesting thing to think.
Very good questions. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Being able to, in many, many ways, determine what is foregrounded, backgrounded, something we talked about a lot last year. Absolutely worth bringing back. Mark?
Yes, when you first started to sort of discuss this wild idea, I've been thinking about this a lot, and something I keep coming back to, and this is a sort of, an and rather than a or sort of zero-sum thing, is a lot of it seems to be addressing something we're moving away from. Everything, it's like all the work I'm involved in at the moment is, in a way that unintentionally, the death of the document or the publication systems that I've known most of my adult life. So when I think about something that's so manipulable, like this constructed sort of VR space, I find myself asking, instead of thinking about putting documents on surfaces and basically reconstructing paper or papyrus or stone or whatever, is thinking, well, wait a minute, I've got all this information. Well, actually, really what I want to do is I want to do things that I can't do. I mean, I know how to make a document. There are lots of things I'd like to do with the information that's in the document that I can't because the document, the systems we have at the moment don't allow it, and just because that's the way they sort of physically have worked. So I think something to add into what you've been said is to think of things, is to deliberately think outside the box of the notion of the document or the document. I'd like to turn around the notion, and rather than the document representing the information behind it, I'd like to think of the document as just one manifestation of the information that is that thing. Because the interaction I want to have is not with the linear document. I want to have it with the information that really underlies it. And that's very much at the center. I'm doing some stuff for, in fact, it's a chemistry group at the university. So it's interesting because, there are all sorts of things, visualization like chemical structures and things. And it's amazing. Some stuff we can only get from a web page. Some stuff we can only get out of a PDF. An awful lot of conversations start with, I just want to, describing something that it is actually not possible to do. In our minds it is, but I keep saying to them, if you want to do that, you need to think about curating your information and your so-called document a completely different way. And we're having some really interesting discussions from it. So I think the thing I'd ask us to be open to is to be careful about unintentionally getting stuck in a sort of McLuhan-esque rear view mirror conception of our information spaces. Thanks.
Yeah, I can see some of that, but when you lose the notion of a document, then you are kind of in the realm of database. And that's another kind of document. It's just a lot bigger. If you look at, I see you shaking your hand there, Mark, but to document is a verb as well. And documents relate to addressability as well. There's nothing here that suggests that we have the equivalent of a PDF and that has to have linear things. We are talking about an actual 3D volume. So that is one significant step. And what is shown in there in terms of the units of bits, there's no indication that they each have to represent a document. They can be pieces of a document, or they can have nothing to do with the document. It can be the user putting a sphere or writing the word hello in space. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. One of the benefits I do think around documents, though, is number one, addressability and portability and freedom. Because if you can take a document with you, you have the data with you. If it is something that is more floating, like a Google Doc, I think there's a certain loss of control. And I'm not saying this is black and white, because you also, Mark, said this is not a but, it's an and. It's an and. So I'm just doing an and slightly in the other direction, not to disagree with the main points. And this is great. People, Rob, Jimmy, Brandel.
Okay, I'm just going to throw some stuff on the floor. I wanted to follow up on Mark. Yes. And in light of that, there was a very early project that Apple did on Laserdisc. And it was they showed a documentary, I think it was on PBS, about the discovery of the DNA molecule. And there's a scene where Rosalind Franklin comes in and says that she's looked at the models that they've been making all the time, and they've all been ugly. And she comes in and the double helix is there, and she just stops and says, "It's beautiful." And I think that, that way of presenting information in 3D space so that you can actually go around it or rotate it is a good way to get away from the flattening of everything that text has imposed on us. So if you think about early cuneiform, it was impressed into a surface, and you could enhance your visibility of it by changing the angle of the sun so that there were shadows cast into the valleys. And yet we flattened it more and more until we're now into two-dimensional space. And I just want to say that virtual reality is not reality. So let's not pretend that it's reality. It should be called something else. And now I want to address the cube versus volume. Volume is not bounded. A cube is bounded volume. It's constrained. So it's not quite the same thing. And I think that if we're thinking about three-dimensional space, a volume in three-dimensional space, we have to think about it in terms of the way our vision system works, which is to jump from one surface to another in a large space, readjust the focus, and put the fovea, the high resolution of sensors into the places that are important. And how we do that in something that is three-dimensional but not reality is a challenge. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you all come up with.
Thank you, Rob. Greatly appreciated. Anyone have a quick comment on Rob? Or okay, we move on to Jimmy and then or Brandel. Was that a quick one for Rob?
No, I actually forgot my point.
Oh, okay. You have your thinking cap on virtually, so I'm sure it'll come back. Okay, Jimmy, and then Brandel, hopefully.
Okay. I was just saying that I don't know much about McLuhan, and I know its medium is the message, but I really didn't quite understand how you can have the information without its representation. If I have the information in my mind, I still have to put it into some form that I can communicate to somebody else. If I and I don't receive information directly, I have to, or because I can't think of a better word right now, read it from a document. And I don't care if the document is a spreadsheet, a printed page, hieroglyphics. I have to get it from that into my mind. And so I think most of you understand this differently than I do. And I just like someone to explain it to me. I feel like it's a deficit I have that haven't, I don't know about this stuff yet.
Okay, I'm going to have to jump in there, Jamie, because I think it's a very, very important point. I just want to highlight that. Information without representation is not information. There are different kinds of representations in our brains, printed and so on. I think that is absolutely 100% the key of all the work that we're doing with the future of text. So I'll put a pin in it because we've got 3 hands up, but that is really, really the big point. So thank you. And Jimmy, over to you.
Okay, thanks, guys. I would just say in response to that, you're correct, Jamie. At the end of the day, the final where the rubber meets the road symbol is in what we're working with, the alphabets, and that is a 2-dimensional object, but there's so much more that is possible with it in a 3-dimensional space. Rather, how you get there, for instance, how you organize that interaction with the alphabet, that is words, that is the ideas behind the words, that is, et cetera, but there's a company called Immersive Analytics, named after, I think, the whole space that's a subject of academia. And their concept is that in a 3-dimensional, 6 degrees of freedom, 360 animated environment that you have as a canvas to work with, you can communicate 15 pieces of information simultaneously at a view, at a glance. Meaning, so you have your cube, and it can be unexploded or exploded, meaning it's in a summarized format as an avatar, as an object, or whether it's in a focused view, for instance. Those are 2 different representations of your cube. Now you have 15 cubes in this 3D space and they're organized in physically. So you have your X, your Y, your Z axis is 3 pieces of information out of these 15. The size of the object that is at the place you're looking is another piece of information. The shape of that object, the color of that object, the animation of that object. Is it jiggling? Is it big? Does it, all of these, there's 15 pieces of information that these guys have a white paper on somewhere. I'll try and look for it. That can be communicated all at the same time, is their contention. And that is something again, that is, it's a conceptual thing of how you organize the spatial canvas that you're working with, and where you put things and why you put them where they are is what they are. I think there was a conversation somewhere earlier in one of these previous speakers said where something is what it is, and this is even more true, I think, in dealing with spatial communication of ideas that are essentially text at the end of the day. But that's what that's my contribution. I did say Flow Immersive. They're a very good group to look at if you haven't been familiar with them before. I think that's also a great software product that is built on data stories, data visualization, analytics in a immersive environment. Thanks.
Just clicked on that link. Thank you very much. I'll definitely look at that afterwards. Yeah, I mean, Mark did a presentation a short while ago on spatial hypertext, which definitely deals with what you're talking about, where it is. I mean, a word in a sentence is the meaning is determined by the sentence. So to an extent, spatially, yes, just brilliant. Shush me, Mark.
I've got a sort of a thought to try and help with Jamie's question, but Brandel, I don't know if you want to go first.
Yeah, I actually wanted to respond to what you were saying, Mark, about what's useful or what's not important or whatever. Like what don't take away my document. And something that I've been thinking a lot about in the context of web browsers, but other things as well, is that um, we can't really come up with better in a context-free sort of perspective. We need to apply some aspect of intentionality in order to make something better. In the same way that Microsoft Word is, is broadly pretty unintentional, whereas if you use an app like Quip or Reader, that they are more intentional. Scrivener, Final Draft are more intentional still. Um, and so to that end, lots of documents are one thing, and reading them is one thing. But a second reading, I've been thinking a lot about second reading. It's a term in Parliament for a reading of bills. They do it in Westminster, they do it in the Beehive. But yeah, this idea that when you have a particular point of view that isn't about the basic exposition of a document, that it can be governed by different rules and relationships. You can have different sort of opportunities because that it's actually less distracting. You've to some extent processed it on its own terms pretty significantly. And so I think that that's something that I've been really excited by, is being able to recognize that by rights, a good document ought to bear scrutiny multiple times, and that's what we should be concerning ourselves with. Is something that we want to have a relationship with. And so, in that context, to your point, Mark, first reading really probably should be a linearized document that you get through in the author's intentional order. But once you have a time to tootle around and kind of kick the tires on things, then you're really doing a different thing. And that's where I think it would be interesting to sort of start to construct tools that have the ability to give people a slightly more opinionated view of what they're going to do with it. That's all I wanted to raise.
We are all about intentionality. This is not about doing generalized stuff. So yeah, absolutely, Brandel. Mark, please.
Yeah, so I think this is all helping contextualize partly what I meant. I think what I was trying to get at was it's a bit like trying to get the child who's learnt to swim to let go of the bar and actually swim out. You know you can swim and you won't sink, but you keep holding on to the bar. And that's the analogy I'm drawing with a linear document, because as Brandel's rightly sort of said, there and others indeed said, there is a point when you need some of this linearity. But we have more than that now. So the challenge to ourselves is to stop unintentionally giving primacy to a particular form of the information. So the document I now try and think of as the entirety of its information, not the one thing in a white rectangle that I see, which has a use and a purpose, and I use it as much as anybody. But I try not to think of it now as, I try not to imagine the document as being that white rectangle sort of floating somewhere in my mind. I try to think of it as this glob of data, which allows me to think, what do I actually want out of this? And I totally take the point that Brendan rightly raises. So, for instance, on a first pass, so the sort of the thing in that little cloud of information that you might interact with might be a linear summary, which is one of the bits of information that sort of cloud of stuff represents. But to sort of link that across to what Rob was saying about this ability to fly through your volume of things, you need to sort of, we need to train ourselves to not over venerate the linear form. So
Mark,
it is an and rather than an or.
Okay, Mark.
But just let me finish, because another sort of telling thing was, and I know it says to be unkind to the presentation at all, but it was noticeable when we look at the cube. All the things I saw in the cube actually were rectangles. They weren't other things. And I think what the point that I'm trying to draw out is there is more we can do. The edge case is things like Jupyter Notebook and there are all sorts of things. There's stuff being done in the R space, and this sort of links across in a way to literate programming things. But you have documents that are more than a fixed and closed textual summation of what lies behind it. I don't know if that helps Jamie at all.
So, Mark,
Thanks.
It does somewhat. Thank you.
I'm not sure why you have said let go of linear documents so many times in this conversation, because we're quite literally talking about things in space. The notion that we're bringing to this particular conversation is you'll have things in space, put them absolutely anywhere you want. But you also have the option to have the sites in space, which nominally is cube because it's an easy thing for a human to relate to, but there's no reason it couldn't have 6 sides on one side or 20 or be a circle or whatever. There's nothing wrong with that. And whether things are stored in a document or not, I think is another discussion. What is inside the cube? The storage, the data behind it is in a way beside the point. We're literally talking about you have a knowledge object here, and then you have the option for things to project onto the space to give the space semantic meaning. Do you have any comment back on that before we go over to Jamie? Because after Brandel and Peter, I'm going to re-ask the question of some cube things.
Okay, I do sort of, because I get confused as to really, I mean, my understanding from previous discussions, going back some ways, that the things we're talking about as knowledge objects was a way to get round talking about documents. So if we now have a knowledge object and we're talking about sort of in a sense documents within it, I get a bit confused.
We're not talking. I'll answer that, Mark. We're not talking about documents as such. We should be able to import a PDF because it's a thing in academia that exists, but that makes it a legacy object. We should also be able to put in Brandel Zakernuk as a name or an avatar with no kind of document related to it. So when I'm talking about documents or papers, I am talking about the method of academic discourse, of publishing, of documenting a statement. How it's stored is, I agree with you very, very much, is very secondary. But for a conference, you have to make a presentation of some sort, spatialized, flat, whatever, so that in the future people can look back and say, what did he say? That's all I mean. I mean more the verb to document. So we're still talking about a space, you put things in, and maybe the walls, if you want to see them, help you how you put things. That was really the point.
I must say, I think I'm rather Rob. I get confused about. To me, the cube robs me of the whole potential of the volume, because the idea is, and going back to Brandel's point about moons ago, talk about we have this limitless screen. We should be duly wasteful of it. Right. Sort of putting this, whether it's got 20 sides or 6 sides is almost by the by. It seems that we're putting walls around ourselves for a purpose I'm not entirely understanding of.
Okay, I can explain the purpose. First of all, the cube can be any size, so it can be bigger than the room, so it can be a volume, absolutely. the notion here, and also you don't need to put anything on all the sides. What it came from, in my mind, initially was if you have on the physical table in front of you a physically 3D printed map of Europe, let's say. I think most of us can remember Fabienne did some work for the European Union where in VR you could see the population of France or whatever it was, right? So it's a layer on top. So the only notion we're talking about here is to be able to do that in XR, where you can have one kind of substrate or none. There's no reason you shouldn't just hide all of that. Absolutely, right? But you can have, here's a substrate that is a physical map, here's a timeline, here's a this, whatever. And then the items in the space can be organized by those or not. So the discussion today is really, let's say we have a volume, let's be honest, it's a volume that may or may not be presented in a cube. What are the kind of ways we want to interact with it, and what are the kind of ways we want to see with it? So that's just a reply. I'm not saying we're done with that discussion, but Jamie, Brandel, Peter, and then I have a question for everyone.
Talking about second reading reminded me of my PhD thesis. I looked at converting scholarly text into hypertext format, specifically in HTML, and lots of things happened. But the thing that I learned from it is that it's Andrew Dillon's concept of information shape. People read something, they understand it in a way that they have, I think he'd call it a rhetorical map of the structure. And when they read it a second time, they already know something about it and where things are. And one of the first things that I said at starting my PhD was this short paper by Sue Dumais about latent semantic indexing. Sue wanted to write it in a hypertextual way, but couldn't because readers would only read it in one order, no matter how it was set up. I might read it ABC and you might read it CBA, but each of us would read it in one order. And so stuff that could appear in multiple sections in different orders, she just had to stick it into this IMRD format because that's what we know. That's the schema that we're used to. And we read from that and we perceive from that and then we work with it. But each of the people I worked with on looking at how we would chop up that paper and rearrange it and what links we would make said the conclusion was once you've read it once, you know where most of the things are. Hypertext is only going to be useful for very long documents. This was a mistake. And it took me 5, 6 years to figure out that it was a mistake. But my point is, second reading is super important. Once you have second reading, people already have some understanding of the structure, some understanding of what's going on. Even I think non-experts, non-domain experts would have some of that. And it reminds me of some other work I was doing, which I was actually dreaming about earlier today, about annotation. That when I did my presentation, oh God, years ago, about our multi-year study of annotation, people said, well, what happens when people go back and read a document twice? The annotations I was looking at were when people were finished. I can't tell what annotations they made the first reading and what they changed and what they made on second and subsequent readings. And I really wanted to study that. The ethics board wouldn't let me. And then this year they said, oh, we should have let you do that. There was no problem. We didn't have to tell you to destroy all those documents you collected. But
Brutal.
this is future of text. This isn't Jamie talking about how awful ethics boards are.
Highly related, Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
At least we're in an environment where there is such a thing. A lot of tech, there is none. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's not all ethics boards. It's my particular ethics board.
Yeah, no, it can get quite messy. Any quick comments to Jamie or over to Brandel?
I
Okay.
rather despise self-appointed ethics experts.
Self-appointed.
They get a God complex.
Yes. So we'll go to Brandel's headset.
Yeah.
Just love the fact that you're in the headset, Brandel. I wish I were, but then I can't record. But yeah, over to you.
Yeah, I am to please. Um, so I back on documents, and to some extent to Jamie's kind of discussion of this ABC CBA, one of the things that a document is, Mark and I have talked a bunch about this before, is an enclosure over a specific set of things. It's a curation. There's a boundary. In a literal sense, with a page, it's what's on the page. But in a spatial thing, it needs to be something that's bounded, if not by polygonal things, then by an implicit sort of temporal journey through being able to attend. It's the attendability of certain sort of features of a broader corpus. Um, I was actually in the Halifax Maritime Museum last week, staying at Dal. My cousin got married, so that was fun. Um, and one of the neat things that they have in, yeah, I realized, yeah, he's a professor there, and I realized actually who should have come say hi. Um, uh, that so at the Maritime Museum they have a whole continuum of like exhibitabilities. They have a bunch of stuff that's on exhibit. Then they obviously have a significant back catalog, and then there's a bit that's called display reserve, or I'm not sure, Jamie, if you're familiar with it, but there's a bunch of stuff. It's not super well lit, and it's not super well presented, but it's all much more there for the purposes of people being able to be at least aware of the fact that it's there. And I think that was really interesting. And sort of, again, something's more like a second reading, something more like an invitation into a further introspection and an investigation. And once you're an insider with the heritage sector, the galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, you become intuitively aware that what they're showing is only 10% approximately of what they have in general, if not less. But yeah, like I thought that was a really interesting thing to realize, is that there's this intensely limiting factor in terms of the attendability of the artifacts that you present on this kind of first reading, and the choices that you have need to flow from what people need to have in order to get to Jamie's point, that sort of structure, that shape of what might lie beyond that first initial pass. And I think I've mentioned before, hopefully not telling tales out of school, that there was a time when Apple.com had 95,000 pixel long pages, and people would say everybody saw it, and I would be like, let's just look at the numbers of how far they got through these 95,000 pixels. You were writing 27,000 words on a page. Can we have an adult discussion about how much any of that would have gone in? And once we did that, for whatever reason, pages became miraculously shorter. So take from that what you will. But yeah, like this attendability feature of a first reading, what it is that you could possibly expect to get into people's minds, what they can do with it, and what that can be used to drive further decisions, is a thing that I think is really interesting. So even if you don't have an enclosed physical polygonal kind of structure, even if you say have a roller coaster through some kind of 6 degree of freedom space, then you're going to be bounded by the visibility, the attendability of those artifacts. And yeah, in some sense, it's possible to draw a line around that, whether that line is kind of reified and rendered existent or not. I don't know what else to say about that, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think attendability, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think attendability is very important. If it's not, if it's something people can't focus on because it's too small for them, or it's too far, or it's there's too much, so they can't see everything at once, I think that that's necessarily important. In terms of Halifax, the lamb sector, yeah, I love it. But as you can see, I'm in my vacation office right now in Ontario. But next time you're coming by Halifax, let me know. And don't worry about the strike. I'm not in the union right now. But I will be at the conference, or at least part of it. Sorry to interrupt.
My mind just fell out of my skull there. But okay, Peter, over to you.
Okay, going back just a hair, I'm really fond of having sidecar documents alongside of original documents. I think that opens up a lot of possibilities for us. Thinking about the cube, if it's going to be something that's small enough for us to be manipulating, there's no reason why it can't actually have more sides than it has actual sides, so that the operation of rotating the cube in one direction would cycle you through a larger number of faces than the cube physically has on it. And also, I wonder what we could do with the corners of the cube, maybe color code them and attach some sort of functionality to them. But the points of the cube just seem like they're just begging affordances, saying, attach some functionality to me. I'm not sure what, but something to play with.
Peter, I'm so glad you said that, because you reminded me of what I was going to comment on Brandl. Fabian, just one brief moment here. This is the point of those smart walls or smart corners or whatever the heck aspects we're going to be using, because Brandl, Edgar, obviously, like you, I'm an obsessive parent, and it's so exciting to see the kids grow up. Edgar now says, oh, last Saturday and things like that. He's 8, so it's not like miraculous or anything. There's only about 2 years ago where he would get confused about the dates, meaning we all grow into learning different arrangements of knowledge. So Doug Engelbart kept moaning about the fact that, moaning is not the right word, that's not kind, but he was concerned that when he was presenting to people, he didn't know what was in their head, so he didn't know what would connect and what wouldn't. So one of the main reasons for these smart walls is to address that. So let's say one of the smart walls is stuff that you know, your own understanding of the field. You put in a bunch of documents or whatever the heck it might be, and you quite literally will see what sticks. So it is a externalization of your knowledge. And it may help the system see visually, not necessarily AI or nonsense like that, see, here's a massive hole. You have nothing to connect to this. And you may then literally turn it around to see that. So thank you, Peter. That helps highlight something from earlier. And now over to Fabian.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right? Yeah. So yeah, a couple of points. The most challenging, in my opinion, is that we talk about objects of knowledge and abstractions and documents, which each of us know exactly what it is for them, and it's actually pretty different for each and every one of us. For some of us who are developers, then it's obviously a chunk of code, or it's the executable after, or the page. For some of us who write poetry, then it's obviously a poem, and all that is not necessarily a problem. But then when we start to give them shape, so for example, like the cube or what I tend to think as a geometric primitive, so I don't really care about how many faces and all that, then it becomes, I think, quite challenging. So the idea for the project about, for example, the bibliographic annotation is to say we need to have one process. And I think whenever we don't do this, whenever we don't have a process with an example of a document, with what would be typically in it, for example, a research paper of about 10 pages with about 5 diagrams or graphs, and eventually an appendix with data sets in it, then I think it's really, really complicated. So it's either pointless because we just take off an abstraction like a cube with nothing in it and none of us get excited, or we get so specific we talk with the same words about different things. So I would tend in such cases that if we were to do presentation and discussion, that we pick an example, even if it pisses off half of the crowd, or it's not going to piss off people, but that it's irrelevant for them, then it's probably easier. Like we say, it's a Jupyter notebook about chemistry or again, whatever. Because I worry a little bit. So when but if we do that, still we can still go with abstraction, like really pure abstraction, nearly. I tend to think it's more valuable, but it might be my bias, to think about what does that abstraction do? What does it provide? What is thus the function? Do we grab it from the corner, as Peter was suggesting before? Yes, and then what does it do? Is it to zoom in and out? Is it to split into pieces? Is it to whatever? And I tend to think that, again, it might be because then I can dig into and build from it, and then give you all something to try, and then we can say, no, that was actually pointless, or cool, it's exciting, we can go on. But if it's really about things, not function, how those things can be modified. I don't know how much forward we can push that. It is again intellectually exciting maybe, but I would tend to suggest if we do say a cube or whatever 3D model, what do we do with it? Do we have minimal affordances of splitting it or merging? What do we do? And maybe then explain for what example of document. I know that would be that would be easier for me. But I don't know what people expect also out of such discussions. So yeah, if you have ideas on what to do with that object, whatever shape it has, I'd be all ears.
So it's perfect for you to say that before what I'm going to say, because I'm going to say exactly the same thing in a slightly different way. So Jimmy and Mark, please go ahead, and then we will address exactly what Fabian said.
Okay. I was just going to make another similar reference to there was a tech that came out from Microsoft, and the guy now works at Google is Blaise Aguirre Arcas. I can never pronounce his name. And it was called Photosynth, and it was the first really hyper mega gigapixel that you could zoom in. It was like a PDF, but way more focusable, where it was a particular file size type that allowed you to just keep zooming in and zooming in, zooming in, like those kinds of, they have super gigapixel camera photos now that you can, of a cityscape, and then you go and you keep focusing into the room of the apartment building that's off in the distance when you started. And that's sort of the metaphor that we're trying to achieve here again, where you have a lot of different scales and perspectives and summaries of summaries of summaries nesting up, and decision trees that are helping you, that are easing the process of getting from the high level entrance point through the cloud of data, sifting and consolidating around where you hit, like what we're talking about, the actual alphabet that you're trying to read. And making that journey as frictionless as possible is a lot of summarization, and you're going through layers of presentation, and none of those have to be in a box or constrained in any way. You have a infinite canvas at your disposal, and I would suggest that's and transporting the user seamlessly back and forth between those layers of representation is the task at hand.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you. Mark, and then question for all of you based on what Fabian said.
Okay, I'm just going to quickly share. So I was thinking about different ways of showing things. This is a very simple beta. It'll be shown at Hypertext this year. It's something Mark Bensine did, which is revisiting Dieberger's Information City, and it's interesting. And so this basically is, as it happens, an outline, but it's being shown in a different way. And I can never remember quite how the navigation works on this, but because it keeps changing. And we've been experimenting with things. But it just goes to this point about unpacking things in a different way. And it makes me think about a number of other confusions I think we make. One is that the more we go to something, for instance, like what's on screen, or we go to the memory palace, the further we move away from necessarily obvious mutual comprehensibility for other people. And I think it's partly because we tend to conflate co-presence with cooperation. And most of the things we end up with are co-presence, and we think we're doing, working together, and that's another confusing thing in this, because I was attentive to Fabian's point there, because and when he was saying about, if I can have the explanation, I can perhaps build it better. Because one of the reasons I sort of keep coming back to this idea of our sort of focusing on the old long form document is that in order to do the other things, there needs to be other information being passed into the information space. in order for the environment to do the things we want. And so one of the problems we create for ourselves is by constantly holding on to the sort of safety bar at the side of the pool, we don't make ourselves explore the other things. It's difficult at the moment because the tools for this aren't necessarily around. So we're trying to imagine tooling or an environment for using information objects or information spaces that we struggle to create because we don't yet have the tools for them. But I do think it's useful to keep in mind just the fact that whether the things we're building, I can't remember who just said it, but we all have a different understanding, and I think it's Fabian said we all have a different understanding. When we say X, we all actually have a quite different understanding of it. And so again, it goes to this fact of whether I'm building a highly personalized memory palace, because the more vivid it is and the more detailed it is, likely it's going to be more and more only comprehensible to me because I knew why it's like that. Yeah. To make it comprehensible to somebody else, I have to start to nerf out some of the detail. That's not a bad thing, because if the intent is for it to be usable by others, and I just think that's another axis we need to keep in mind in discussion of these spaces. Thanks.
Yeah. So right, this leads to the question. Well, first of all, this is very relevant. Next week is one very, very focused topic. How do we want this year's book to be presented in XR? I hope we can have the future of text 1 through 6 in XR, not just the new one. Shouldn't be technically difficult, but how do we want the information to be shown? The reading of a single article most likely will be pretty much as it is now. It's comfortable, at least to read a single page. Why put it all over the place, right? So we get to the notion of, if we treat all the elements in the future of text book, and this is where I'm saying I'm mirroring Fabienne here, we're talking about one single case study, right? We're all authoring for this, at least you're all welcome to, and most of you already have. If we look at what the future of text books are, they are logically the same as a journal. They have author names, they have topics that are either human or programmatically assigned to different sections. They have paragraphs, they certainly have references. There's a certain set of things they have. Some of them may be in LLM land, and it can be discussed whether it's real or not. But some of them are definitely right there, black and white on the page, right? So if we want to present this spatially, of course we can do something like what Mark showed. And I know, Mark, you were showing that in a positively backward session this way, like a building. That could be fun. But if we say that we're going to present it as a cube or a volume, but the reason I say cube is, can we have scaffolds to help us deal with it, right? Maybe the cube only has one rectangle, forget all the other ones. What if we hold up one literally like a dish? And it's something that we have made ourselves with, HCI, JSON, the things that we care about. And then we see all of this. I mean, we're talking a couple of million characters for the books. How can we do that? And also, I do think it's really, really important that these volumes should be storable inside volumes as well and shareable independently. So I could imagine someone writing in the very loose sense, commentary on the previous books for the new one and saying, so-and-so said this here, so-and-so said that there, and present that spatially in a way that's accessible. This could be fun. So the framing I'm putting for this, and this framing is up for argument, absolutely. We expect that the basic old article will be read almost like a PDF in XR, right? If we can think of a better visualization, fine. For what we are doing now, maybe we do each of us a spine of that. Maybe not. If you have better ideas, fantastic. But we should have the option of going full Ted Nelson and having visualized links to previous articles or external articles and doing that. But we have one set of knowledge, All of this is done in .liquid documents, meaning we have semantic markup. They mean something, we know who did what. We can choose to experimentally run LLMs all over it if we want to for specific things. So my question to you then, what are the things? One thing Mark has pointed out really, really well is just the fact that you put it spatial doesn't necessarily mean you get more knowledge out of it, right? So does anyone have now, right now, on the spot, without thinking too hard, a dream view of this kind of Fantasia Minority Report kind of a thing? Actually, Jamie, I'm going to put you on the spot to begin with. Imagine, with all the knowledge you have of hypertext, all of the academic knowledge you have, imagine an absolute magical space. Forget XR, it's a holodeck. You walk in, you have 6 volumes of books, you know some of it, you don't know all. What are the key things that you're burning to be able to do?
What I remember is that the writing about attention ripping, that when you leave one document and go to another one, you don't know where you just were. You don't have the context anymore. And on many web browsers, when you go back, you're not even at the same view. The link you left from is now at the top of the page, assuming it was a text page. I remember this was done with pre-web, with a NATO conference, and with Jakob Nielsen was there, and everybody annotated, putting in links to other people's papers and the margins of their papers, and the whole thing was a disaster. So I'd be very concerned about the human aspects. What I like is one of Ted Nelson's ideas of projecting on a sphere or something so that you see the documents side by side and you see the line connecting them, and then you can choose to bring one more in focus. So you know, if you have some spatial sense, you know where you are, and you can go back. You can say, oh, I was reading this and there's a reference to that. Now I want to see this, but I can also go back. I'm not losing everything. But as somebody said already, you can't have everything out there at once because it's overwhelming and there's no way, too many pixels on the screen. Yes, Frode.
Okay, I'm so glad you said that, because a week ago I would have agreed with you, but I now completely disagree.
Okay, tell me why.
The feeling, and forget the data, forget reality, the feeling should be when you put on this headset, every single piece of information in the history of humanity is available right there.
Right. Yeah, it should be.
Yeah.
It should be right there, but it's a question of, we used to talk about lost in hyperspace before Mark started calling it the navigation problem, which suggests.
No, exactly. So the thing is, we're living in an age where now with super fast connections, all of these wonderful things coming together. So if we approach it from theater, we have degrees of separation, obviously, right? So
Yeah.
I'm answering also Mark's comment here in the chat. Finding the article to read, Mark, is one of the things that doing it spatially addresses. Just that simply. I'm not pretending that we'll necessarily make them spatial, right? But what we have is, if Jamie writes a new article referring to what you have written and what Randall has written, at least we can do a Ted Nelson style. Those two can be brought forward, right?
And I wouldn't want transclusion is big for me. I wouldn't want just to say somewhere in this 10, 20, 3,000 page article, Peter wrote this. I would want to say here and here and here. These are the parts.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can go and read them yourself to see why they're connected and they're not coherent.
No, absolutely important. High resolution addressability is an important thing. But what we're talking about is orienting ourselves in this knowledge, right? Who am I in this? So that means, first of all, finding out what are the articles that are just not going to be interesting for me, just to get rid of them, just to hide them. That's one thing that's important. It's clutter. Not everything is interesting for everybody. But then at the same time, you're reading something and you realize now that one of the articles you thought was clutter is suddenly interesting.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying I in any way or any of us have answers to this, but this is what is so exciting about the opportunity, right? Because we have this as good quality data. The veracity is 100% only as far as we know who wrote it. It may be rubbish, every single thing in there, right? But that's all we're talking about.
It's
What
1 o'clock.
Oh, we're out of time. So if we can, if you guys can think till next week about the dreams around this, if nothing practical comes out of it, I don't think that's a problem. I think right now we really, even though Fabien will be implementing, and he, you know, Mark has been incredibly helpful with getting the right data and so on, we can start really looking at it. You know, how do we want to find the article? And just to, as a framing, I think I'm repeating, but please forgive me. We expect the front page, at least, of each article to be presented as a PDF visually, as a notional thing. The key initial issue is there's so many damn articles just to see how they connect to your prior understanding, and if they're interesting. That's the big issue.
Mm-hmm.
And saving views will be really, really important. Like you made a mess. It's like, this is, thank you, Brandel. Look, you will be here in a week, I hope. With good, big ideas on that, right. And all of this, this is at the 2 hour mark or 1.5 hour mark, this is where it starts to frustrate me, because how do we do the interactions is something that I care about very, very, very much. So I think we should muddle some interactions with the general conceptual ideas. But if you can play around and stand and look like idiots, like I do, and do something like, hang on, if I do this and I pull out from my hand, might that mean something in XR? You know, to get to that level. Because, you know, what we're doing here is to do something that Fabien will build and present. But it's also the record of this for someone in 100 years to be able to go back and be inspired, just like we were inspired today looking back at Ted's original stuff.
It also reminds me of the first issue of Wired magazine, which I'm told they had to abandon it because it was just too confusing for people. But I wonder if we looked at it now, it would be something we'd understand better. I talk to my students about early television advertisements, how there were so few cuts in them, uh, and it'd be totally boring now. But you couldn't do the kind of things we did now because people hadn't come along with it yet. And then I wave my hands and say, read McLuhan. But you all know that Mark's laughing.
Absolutely. And this is really, I have to say it like this from my perspective, it's really fucking hard. It deserves a swear word. Because I see you, Jim, you're sitting in front of sand. We are designing sandcastles on top of sand. There is nothing there except for the human body and the human brain.
Yeah, and I think at some point, I mean, there's great value in working from theory and experiment and avoiding pitfalls. But I think there's also another type of value in building something, trying things, and then understanding better for ourselves what it is that works and doesn't. Because we're not getting everybody into Future of Text to advise us. And also, perhaps there's too much hesitation to try something. I remember Doug Hofstadter writing about how there'd never be OCR, optical character recognition. And obviously, we have reasonable, although not perfect, optical character recognition right now, and all sorts of other things.
Well, I'm a big proponent of the mechanistic parts of LLMs or AI or whatever we choose to call it on that kind of a really basic level. It's just useful. But yeah, trying genuinely new things is scary. You're absolutely right, Fabian. But here's the thing. In the last few minutes, because we all have to go. Just let's be like a little bit hippie and imagine right in front of us now we have a couple of hundred articles, right? How do we want to go through it? One of the things we may want to do is read the ones by our friends, right? Maybe that's a good place, a human place to start. So we happen to have a wall or thing or whatever that or the people we work with. So we choose to point to that, snap our fingers. Maybe that's a gesture, literally snap. And then if there's an article written by someone, there's a line. Maybe that's one way to get to grips with it. And then we shunt everything else away, right? To get to a sculptural point like this, maybe what we do is choose to go full AI for a minute and say, read all of these. Is any of this debunked according to whatever LLM AI? And it may come up with an opinion you look at and you completely disagree with it. That's fine. Right? And then you go to different specialists. I mean, we're very lucky to have Peter, Mark, and Jamie here who are very specific scholars of hypertext. And you may have very specific knowledge that we can use, spatially, in this. So we have to think of these substrates, because when I'm not trying to box us in by this cube notion. I'm trying to allow it to expand out, but with dimensionality to it. Now, a cube is simple. I hope we won't stop there. You know, we should be thinking tesseract. We should be thinking multidimensional cube. We should be able to move our hands in a gestural way so that now we have a different cube. Now we've changed it, right? But the one thing I don't want us to worry about is we have this semantic zooming. So you pick a thing, you pull it towards you, and it goes from iconic form, which can be interacted with, to the thing itself. I'm going to use the term document for simplicity, right? On the face of it, there's nothing wrong with reading a well laid out PDF. You know, we deal with that some other time. But you do that. But you have to have the opportunity to annotate these things, either by writing or by moving or by coloring, right? You have to make this your mess. Anyway, this is exciting, and it's unbelievably exciting for me to have this dialogue with you guys. It's wonderful. Mark and I started some of these discussions back in the year after Hamilton. Actually, this is the 10th anniversary of Hamilton. Did you know that?
Yes.
Oh, I love you, Jamie. One of my very best friends in the world has refused to see it for
I haven't
years.
seen it yet, but my immediate family has.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
No, but it
Okay.
shows up all the time in my feeds.
Okay, this goes for all of you. Please don't see it until you come home here to see it with me. It is an experience to share. It is not just a passive watching. Anyway, with love and respect and gratitude, I look forward to seeing you on Monday. If you have something written beforehand, great. If not, let's just show up with a blank page, blank space, and write the future of text. Have a good week, everyone.
Yep, take care. Have a great week.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.